Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about the importance of resetting on every rep on the deadlift. Not only why we do it, but how to go about doing it. Because that came up the other day in some topics. Someone had asked me, Jason, how long should you wait between reps on the deadlift? Like how far apart should they be? And that's pretty easy to answer. If you just watch what I'm doing in this clip that we're going to be watching of me doing just some light triples with a hook grip. So I'm just doing deficit deadlifts there with a hook grip. You'll notice that I fully reset on every single rep. Meaning, how long should you take? Well, it's not about doing rest pause. Now, it's not to say that rest pause deadlifting isn't very, very effective. Rest pause deadlifting can be extremely effective. Very much so because of the nature of the exercise. But it's not really about recovery between reps, because actually this is the most difficult way to do it. Meaning, if you actually fully reset every rep, even if you're taking a second or two, you're going to get a lot less reps than you would get while bouncing it off the floor or doing touch and go, because it's simply harder to do. So it's not really about taking a break to recover between. What it's about is consistency. Meaning, you'll notice when I go up and pull my first rep each time, what is it that you see me do? You see me pull the slack out of the bar. I ratchet everything up tight and then put my hips into an ideal pulling position. I drop my hips down, so it's like a pre-motor unit slack technique. And so I'm getting my hips and everything set to an ideal position to break the weight off the floor from a dead stop. So you'll also notice that I readjust the bar over my feet. So what's the point of that? Well, I'm resetting the bar back mid-foot. Now, the question becomes, how long should it take you to do that? There's no time limit on that. What I would say is that it takes you however long it takes you. Look, if you can pause on the floor for half a second and then reset your hips, pull the slack back out of the bar, get the bar perfectly mid-foot, get all of your pulling mechanics back to how they were on the first rep, then by all means, a half a second. But if it takes you 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, you should take however long it takes you to reposition the bar to make everything identical. And the whole point we get to here is that it's about making it identical. In other words, every single rep should actually be a deadlift. Now, what we see a lot of times people do is that they do touch and go deadlifts where they kind of bounce the weight off of the floor. And in my opinion, and I don't have statistics to back this, but I have anecdote of observing the iron game for 20 years. Every single person that I meet who talks about hurting their back on the deadlift, what do they tend to have in common? All these people with these disc herniations and back problems and everything else from doing the deadlift, even the dreaded bulging disc between the L4 and L5, for those familiar with that meme right now, tends to come from bouncing the deadlift off the floor. Well, you need to remember when you're doing that is there's a few different things going on. Number one, you're potentially jarring your back, because again, you're just kind of bouncing, pulling again. So there's that concern for jarring of the back, but that isn't even always your biggest concern. When you think about what's going on, when you see people touch and go, every single rep is completely different. You notice people start side loading the weight. If you guys recall that one where I talked about Jeff Cavalier doing those high rep thing, while he was talking about making every rep identical, they weren't, were they? If you notice, like his third rep, I think the bar dipped down to the left, so the right side was higher in the air than the left, and then the fourth rep, it was the exact reverse. So, it was rep to rep, each one was different. The bar was being loaded all sorts of weird directions. What else happens with it? You get uneven pulling mechanics, meaning you could have more tension pulling you anterior versus posterior on different sides, like the weight can actually helicopter a little bit, right? Can shift side to side. So what ends up happening is that you tend to get a lot more uneven loading. We'll have people go on and on about the mixed grip being a problem for uneven loading, and I agree that it can be, and that's kind of a different topic completely, which I've talked about in the past. But if people are that concerned about the mixed grip being uneven, even if your pulling mechanics are pretty identical and the bar is moving through the same path on each side, how much worse are we getting of uneven loading when you have one side of the bar lift 4 inches higher than the other, or when you have it swing out front to back in a different direction from rep to rep? Aren't we getting an enormous amount of uneven loading? Isn't that going to have the potential for, again, not only muscle imbalances, but uneven loading of the spine? All right, that's not an ideal situation when we start getting with heavy weight. So what we're looking at there is just the enormous risk of injury, right? These back injuries, that's why they happen. They happen because people don't check their ego at the door. They do all these touch and go deadlifts so that they can do more reps. So they can take their 3 rep max and they can grind out 6 or 7 reps. Well, hopefully people can see the problem there. If you can find a way to take an exercise to make it easier for you to do more reps with the same weight because you found a way to make the weight easier to lift, are you actually working harder? No. Again, you're trying to make a display of strength. It's like, how many reps can I possibly get with this weight? Not how many quality reps can I get. How can I get the most muscle activation out of every rep? Now, that's the difference when we're talking about building strength versus demonstrating it, right? You're at that point, you're just giving a demonstration of it, but you're not getting ideal muscle fiber recruitment. It is much harder to pull a weight from a dead stop on a deadlift. It's much more difficult. So you're going to get less reps, but every single rep is having to fire muscle fibers harder. You are working harder. Well, if you're working harder, then you're going to end up getting better stimulation, aren't you? And because we're doing less total reps with the same weight, or you're forced to use a slightly lighter weight, we get less axial loading. We recover from it better. And deadlifts are difficult to recover from. So anything that we can do to maximize muscle fiber recruitment and therefore growth and strength stimulation while minimizing the horrific recovery elements associated with the deadlift is a good thing. And so by not doing touch and go, we get that because we'll end up with less total axial loading for the amount of stimulation that we get. So you've got that to factor in. And then the fact of, again, just the quality reps, because if it's easier, you're not recruiting more muscle fibers. So that's not ideal from a training stimulus perspective. And then we come down to that point of identical reps. People will say again, well, why do the identical reps matter? Well, number one, injuries, uneven loading, again, possibly damaging your back. That's a big factor. But what about consistency in training? What about consistency of the bar path and motor patterns involved? See, that's something that people forget about also when we're talking about loading a weight and we're talking about consistent progressive overload. That's why changing exercises too often is a problem, because all these multi-joint exercises have a motor pattern associated with them, don't they? They have motor unit learning associated with them. And when they're detrained, you learn the motor pattern and then you start growing. So in other words, if you're consistently performing an identical motor pattern every time, you can get better at performing that motor pattern. Therefore, your strength is going to go up more quickly. But that strength goes up more quickly because you become better at performing the movement and recruiting the muscle fibers through the appropriate patterns. So as you become neuromuscularly more efficient at an exercise, that also means that you recruit more muscle fibers. Well, if you recruit more muscle fibers, you gain more size, because the strength component can be the neuromuscular and the size matters also, right? So you're dealing with both. But by being consistent with it, we have the most potential to gain size and strength. And that's what we're looking for. And if we're having random motor patterns because our reps, let's say we do a 5-rep set, and because we're bouncing it off the floor, every single rep is a slightly different motor pattern, we're not getting the same consistency of training. And if we're not getting the same consistency of training, we're not able to ensure our progressive overload as well. So what we're talking about here as far as resetting on every single rep, we're looking at a lot of different factors and benefits. Number one, we're reducing our risk of injury. All right, we're reducing our overall risk of injury. Granted, we can't show off as well because we can't do as many reps with the same weight. But again, reducing the risk of injury. We are getting more consistent muscle fiber recruitment, not just because of the more difficulty of breaking it off the floor each time, which is the hardest part of the exercise, but a more consistent motor pattern that we can train. And if we can train a motor pattern better, we can make more growth from it. So we've got that to go with it. So the better potential for gains, and then it's slightly easier to recover from. Now, granted, the deadlift itself is always hard to recover from, so anything that we can do, because we end up with less total axial loading, the easier it is to recover from. So we're picking up 3 completely separate benefits by resetting on every rep. And that makes it totally worth it. And therefore, I think everyone should reset, and you should take as much time as necessary on every rep for you to replicate identical reps throughout your set. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.